My name is Professor Matthew Pepway, author of Cuban Literature in the Age of Black Insurrection, Manzano, Plácido, and Afro-Latino Religion. And just want to take a brief moment to share how excited I am about a lesson I was able to teach in my course, Introduction to Literature of the Hispanophone World. In the course, we began with an example of African sovereignty, with the Mauritanian invasion, Black Islamic invasion of Spain in 1086 and conquest of southern Spain and southern Portugal. And we essentially moved throughout the centuries looking at different important literary movements. One of the last things I do in the class is to introduce Nancy Morejon's poem, The Black Woman, La Mujer Negra, and Carmelo Rodriguez Torres' short story. He's a Black Puerto Rican author. His short story, Fuencarral. Mujer Negra is essentially a text that explores how African women were brought to Cuba against their will, specifically to Cuba against their will as enslaved women, and the process by which they struggle to come into self-definition. And throughout the poem, there's a series of declarative statements like, I rebelled, I fought in an insurrection, and it ends essentially with the Cuban Revolution as the culmination of that struggle. The other text, the short story Fuencarral, is a story about a black man who around the age I believe it is, lost the ability to speak and was a founder of a town, a small Puerto Rican town, who's accused of rape by a young woman who is presumably white, though we're not entirely sure. He is innocent of the crime that's imputed to him, but everyone believes that he is guilty, and he is not able to defend himself because he is unable to speak. Es un mudo. He's able to hear, but he's not able to speak. Entonces, no es un sordo mudo, pero es un mudo. And so we compare the two texts today, and the idea was essentially to provide my students with a model of gender studies that looks at the particular vulnerabilities of women of African descent. For example, the enslaved woman is herself violated by the master and gives birth to the master's child. But she's also an insurrectionist, right? She's also a revolutionary, and in the best sense of that word. And to compare that with the forms of vulnerability of this man of African descent, both being Afro-Caribbean Latinos, Spanish-speaking folk, right? Afro-Latin American in the broader sense of the term. So we compared and contrasted both. And what I did was I brought in a short subsection from chapter 4 of the philosopher Tommy Curry's book, The Man Not. The chapter is called The Fiat of Dreams. It's chapter 4, and it talks about the fact that in the United States, the Innocence Project has been able to demonstrate that 60% of the men that are exonerated of the crime of rape, 60% of the men that are exonerated of the crime of rape are black men. And so I use that contemporary statistic to allow my students to think about Fuencarral, inability to defend himself, because the accusation is what determines the gaze. The accusation what determines the way men of African descent are viewed, not their character. So it was a powerful class. My students did an extraordinary job with both texts. I'm very proud of them. And I just wanted to share this. We have another way of doing gender theory. We can talk about the shared vulnerability of men and women of African descent at the same time, because it's only if we bring the principles, the masculine and the feminine principles together, will we really be able to develop the types of communities that can solve problems. So, appreciate you listening. Ashe.